Welcome to Be Customer Led, where we'll explore how leading experts in customer and employee experience are navigating organizations through their own journey to be customer led and the actions and behaviors employees and businesses exhibit to get there. And now, your host, Bill Staikos.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Be Customer Led. This is your host, Bill Staikos. I have another amazing guest for you all today. So Ryan Hart, Ryan's someone I got to know last year. And before he joined the Chameleon Collective, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit, he was managing director of PwC's Japan's Tokyo Experience Center, part of PwC's APAC Experience Consulting Leadership Team, where he and his team of experienced strategists, UX, UI designers, and creative technologists designed and developed innovative products and services for differentiated product service experience advantages. Ryan, so great to have you on the show. I learn every time I talk to you, man. So I'm so excited for our listeners to enjoy your time here as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. Always great to connect with you and great to be back in the States now talking with you.
I know. Last time we talked, you were in APAC, and now you're back in the States, which is wonderful. So today we're talking about the evolution of experience management, something that clearly you know a great deal about, and we can go deep on. Before we get there, though, just Ryan, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your journey? And now you're interim CXO and CX practice lead at Chameleon Collective. So Interactive, excuse me. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have a very, like a lot of really good customer experience people that I've met throughout my career. I have a really long circuitous route actually to get to where I am. And as opposed to, I remember when I used to work for JP Morgan and I used to look at these guys that were, managing director, and they've been in the bank for 20 years. And I was like, wow, it must be so great to be that senior. But now I look at those people and I think that, someone that doesn't have the experience of different industries, different jobs, different geographies, really difficult to have a holistic view of, what customers want and how to apply those kind of strategies. So just taking a look at understanding the people that have really diverse backgrounds. So for me, I've had a very diverse background. I've been in APAC for probably 14 or 15 years. I started in banking and real estate in Japan and China, moved back to Japan to help launch HSBC Premier, which was quite disruptive for the Japan market. And that was really wealth management space, as you know, Bill, from your time at Credit Suisse. So we launched that business there. And really that was kind of my first experience with understanding that you really need to create a differentiated experience to win customers away from the incumbent domestic banks. And so what was that going to be? What was going to be so that compelling pull to bring customers to us from those? And really, we identified very smartly that it was experience. That was early 2000, around then that we did that. And so from that point, I really saw that, creating a differentiated experience for customers was really a way to not only just look and feel nice and have people happy, but really it was driving revenue and it was winning customers. And so for me, that was where the light bulb switched on. And ever since then, I've been in customer strategy and customer experience type roles that have led me, Singapore. I started a company in Chicago that I got hired by Sapient Nitro to go lead their practice in Singapore. So close that down. But then, here I am back in the States. So it's been great. And I think, for me, really the most special time and one that accelerated that learning curve was when I was with Forrester. So I was with Forrester for about 5 years, led their customer experience practice and some of the thought leadership in Asia Pacific based in Singapore. And then they moved me back to San Francisco to lead design thinking and some of the innovation work in the CX space, and which for me was just a really fast and accelerated learning experience.
Man, you've had such an incredible career from a broader, big C customer experience perspective. So now you're a Chameleon Collective. So tell us a little bit, because that's a little bit of a different business model too, right? So tell us a little bit about your role there.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. It's really interesting because Chameleon Collective is, in so many ways, it's the future of work, really. So basically we have these people that are senior partners at these management consulting firms. Maybe they were a former CMO at a large corporate organization or a practitioner in another place. And they've just kind of gotten disenchanted or kind of disenfranchised with this life at a big corporate organization. So these people, part of I don't know if you call it the great resignation or the great realization, but a lot of these people now have realized, I just want to do my own business. I want to work closer with my customers. So for me, leaving a large organization like PwC, it's when you're a managing director or you're quite senior in an organization, you spend a lot of your time doing performance reviews and dealing with internal team mechanics and personnel issues. But really, you just want to be closer to the clients and you want to be closer to the work. So it's a flat organization. Everyone has their own LLC or their own S Corp. And then it's kind of where partnerships maybe started 30 years ago, when they first started, which was everyone had their own book of business and their own clients. And then when they needed to deliver work, they actually drew from the skills and experience that these other people had. And so that actually, through scale, then allows them to go after bigger and more exciting pieces of work and transformation work.
Really interesting. Well, no doubt your own clients that you're bringing on for yourself and your business are going to get a ton of value out of your expertise and what you can bring to the table. But clearly you've got access to other resources as well, which is pretty
Absolutely.
awesome.
And I mean, when you work for a big company, sorry if I can just interject.
No,
if you
go
work
ahead.
for a really, really big company, obviously they have a lot of overhead costs. They have a lot of just the cost structure is just so massive that what you charge clients is maybe 3 or 4 times what you would as if you were an independent consultant, for example. So the value that actually clients get now is you have someone who is a C-level executive or has experience running large businesses or P&Ls, and then actually has them directly working in the business at really a third or a fourth of the cost. The hourly rate or the project costs are a lot less, but all that money then goes to the people that are delivering the work.
So I'm actually a big fan. I've been having a lot of conversations with friends who have been fractional CMOs or fractional other C-level kind of roles. I think the fractional CXO is something that not a lot of people are exploring yet, but I think it's absolutely going to start up as people say, hey, I may not want to go all in and, this way and just go spend a ton of money on a senior leader. I want to go find someone who's an experience, but can stand up this team, get it started, and even coach and nurture someone who we want to bring up from within as well. I think that there's a really interesting business case and model in there that I think the companies are going to start to explore more and more.
Absolutely. Do you see any particular industries that's happening more so, Bill?
So I see that a little bit. I see the interest coming from a couple of industries, actually. I see like the communications industry a little bit, so smaller, like mid-market players, sometimes in the retail space. And a couple of other people that I've talked to about this have been a little bit more on like the private equity / VC side.
Yeah.
Right. So not like massive funds, but how do you apply a customer experience strategy or create a customer experience strategy that covers or crosses a portfolio of companies? Right. So we don't need like a big CXO to run all this, but we need someone who can come in, call it CX in a box, whatever you want to call it, and actually apply it to the portfolio so they can all kind of bring CX into their own companies, apply this model. And then, the goal obviously is could that create a higher multiple or get quicker to multiple or both? So
totally. Yep. I agree. So I guess, you look at a lot of companies that have done leverage buyouts, for example, or that have taken over companies. They want a quick path to revenue, right? So a lot of times they think that what they need to do is obviously they need to go in and get to marketing people right away. But honestly, what I think is if you look at some of the more sophisticated organizations, you look at Gap, you look at Banana Republic, for example, they've basically they removed the CMO position, and all those people then roll up into a chief customer officer. So I think the really smart, more sophisticated organizations are, if you really want a path to revenue that's sustainable, not just a quick hit with marketing, really is to build in the foundation of what is the customer, what is it that our users really need, what do we really want. So the foundation, these are basically the customer experience management maturity, foundation pieces. So basically putting those in and then saying, okay, going forward, what's the sustainable path for us to generate revenue out of our customers? It's to align closely with their expectations and basically really, build our practices around that. That includes marketing, but that also includes design. That includes enabling your workforce to deliver on your CX vision. That also includes, being able to prioritize and create the right strategy that maximizes the impact. So a lot of really interesting work out there. And I hope that more companies see a chief customer officer is actually probably better value than just going after marketing folks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like Walmart, big companies, right? Walmart, McDonald's recently had their CXO,
Totally.
or they created it. Now their marketing organization, transformation, all these roles. When you think about, Ryan, just kind of given your experience, and you've seen so many teams, so many different leaders, what type of leader do you feel typically has the most success? Like, what's the makeup of that individual? Because it's a really tough role, one, but it's also tough from the perspective of not just sort of leading so much transformation organization, but influencing multiple C-level executives, et cetera. So like, when you see success in your past lives, what have you seen? Like, what is that leader typically doing?
So I think you basically nailed it, Bill, when you said that. The influence piece for me, being a great influencer is so critical, I think, to actually getting work done, more so than if you're, really smart, someone who's a great executioner. Maybe they can execute work and they can get a lot of work done. But to be able to influence other parts of the business, I think it cannot be understated. That is so important. And something that I learned actually working with your former employer, Credit Suisse, actually, is that, you can have different groups that, let's say, high net worth individuals, for example. These people are very protective of their clients, and they're obviously trying to do work with them, maybe even though they're high value to the organization, making sure they have a great experience has, obviously will have a good impact on the business. But what I see is actually sometimes people that are maybe not so protective, but are a little bit more willing to work and make changes. Maybe it might be the second most important area of the business, or third, maybe not the core area. Start there and then start building that influence across the organization. You'll have people that are more resistant to a customer experience transformation, maybe start working with you and filing in behind you once they see that there is value in doing that. So I think influence I think smart it's important to be smart. It's important to be personable, but I think to be a good influencer is such a critical skill.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That is number one for me. When you look at this kind of leadership and the type of person, and you're right, you can get things done all day long. And sometimes people are promoted into these roles because they're great on the execution side, but then sometimes they fall short because great execution in your kind of silo, but then when you start working across, you may not have that skill set, which really can kind of break things down. When you think, Ryan, around experience management and the core tenets, what do you think some of those core tenets are? And do you see them, or have you seen them different by, do you see differences in like digital versus non-digital, or by vertical? What do you think those are, and what, kind of works across?
Right. So again, if I can kind of tip my hat again to Forrester, I think that they came up with a really good structure for what they think are the competencies, or really the capabilities that every organization needs to have. And I think the really great thing about customer experience is that it cuts across all industries. It cuts across all channels too. So, really, you have to research and understand the needs of your customers. So research is a key tenet. You have to understand what are your priorities, what is going to be drive the maximum value for your customers and for your business. So that's really prioritization and strategy. You need to then be able to design your experiences that align with your customers' your expectations. So, having a really good design capability, whether you're an airline or you're a bank or a telco, whether it's digital, whether it's physical, that's so critical that you're actually proactively designing the right experience based on those research insights. Then basically you have to be able then to enable your people. That speaks to employee experience. You need to be able to enable them and empower them with the right tools and service blueprint, and kind of, how are we going to deliver on this customer experience vision? So really enablement is so critical. then, all the big bosses and people are going to come and ask, like, what have you been doing? So you got to be able to measure that. I think measurement is such a critical, and I think we've talked a little bit about journey analytics, you and I, but obviously being able to measure and show the return on investment for your efforts. And then the last one is culture, and having the right culture and having the right people that, building that. Those are really the key tenets that I see, companies that are really successful at customer experience do all of those well, or most of those well.
Why do you think, that's 4 or 5, let's say 5 things or so. Why
Mm-hmm.
do you think, or where maybe even is a better question, because it's hard. This is hard work, right? Like 1, the company has to have the stomach for it. 2, everyone's got to be bought in. 3, it takes a lot of money to do this really well. Not just saying, hey, we're investing in a technology stack to support us, but also, thinking about all the changes to an organization that you need to potentially make as well. There's real investment dollars that are associated with that. Why do you think people fail? Or maybe in those Forrester kind of pillars, where do you think people fail the most, or maybe don't put as much emphasis on?
Well, I think one is sometimes you have certain, probably, you've seen this in your career, Bill, but you have certain executives that are more comfortable with certain areas of the business than others. And so sometimes they think, oh, well, we really need a design. So they would focus all on design. And then unfortunately, that neglects other areas that they also need to focus. So in a way, you need to kind of build all of those competencies together so that they're all kind of orchestrated and working together. But I think really where people fail, and it's almost cliche to sound this because everyone talks about it, but really it's being able to speak the language of the people with money and being able to financially show what is the ROI of whatever project you're doing, whether it's the entire customer experience transformation, showing the ROI, or whether it's basically, what is the ROI if we were to go out and, paint all of our stores red. What's going to be, how is that going to impact customer experience? Yeah, we see anecdotally that customers would like that, but how is that actually going to translate into more sales? And so being able to connect those dots between the money story and actually the customer insight story is the challenge that, frankly, a lot of customer experience professionals just are not prepared to have because, a lot of us aren't coming from financial backgrounds, right?
Yeah. I remember in a past life when I joined a company, I won't mention the name, but when I got there, they're like, oh, you're going to help us do better surveys and listen to our clients. And I was like, sure, that's part of the role maybe.
Right.
They're like, well, what do you think your role is? I was like, I've got 3 main objectives. I'm going to increase the revenue of this company. I'm going to reduce costs. And I'm going to improve the culture. And those are measures that we're going to have. And they're like,
yeah, that's golden.
well, right? Like, and they're like, well,
Yeah.
customer satisfaction's on our scorecard. I'm like, great, that's fantastic. Keep it there. I'm not telling you to take it off, but
Yeah.
you've got efficiency measures, you've got revenue targets. Those are the ones that we're going to connect to and drive. And I think you're right 100% that so many times we get caught up in having a great NPS program and getting the metric up and understanding what the drivers of NPS or customer sat or effort are. We get lost in that a lot as leaders and professionals sometimes, and we forget that at the end of the day, we are here to drive the business, do it in a way that customers is good for customers, but you got to find that balance. And that's really tough to do, no doubt.
That's a really good point. And I think what I see is oftentimes that people get so obsessed with measuring around NPS and these numbers that they will do anything to manufacture outcomes that they actually will serve their purpose, right?
Yeah.
And I used to travel to Australia a lot for work when I was based in Singapore, and I would go there, and every time I went down there, I would have more and more people that I would meet. This was in the time of business cards, so everyone had business cards, and everyone gave business cards, and it was like, oh, you're now head of customer experience. Oh, now you're chief customer officer. Oh, now you're no, and it's just more and more cards. But actually, I saw that you look at across Australia at the time, the customer experience benchmarks were not going up. Actually, saying they were stagnant for 5 years, and we saw that the economy was actually in those sectors that there were more customer experience people. It was actually going down. It was actually decreasing. So it's like, what are they doing then? Their MBUS scores are going up, but it's actually not actually creating any material uplift in the business.
What was did you ever come to what was your perspective on that? Like, why do you think that? Because Forrester, right? All these firms, they've created all this research. So all these scores are kind of petering out, right?
Yeah.
Trees don't go to the sky, right? eventually like it gets harder and harder. I mean, going from 90 to 95 is a 50% increase because you've only got 10 points to go, right? Versus going from like 80 to 85, right? Because you've got 20 points in between 80 and 100. But why do you think that that was happening? We're hiring more CX leaders, but the numbers aren't really moving. What are we doing wrong?
So I think, I mean, it's kind of a broad brush problem because, I mean, basically you're saying, okay, we want to increase our NPS score across our entire customer, cohort or population. But the problem is you see that, at the end of the day, not all customers are equal, right? You have some that are obviously high value customers that are spending a lot of money with you and engaging with you and things like that. But then you have a lot of these detractors who may be, spending. I mean, let me give you a real example. So when I was at HSBC, what I realized is we had actually, we were burning everyone was like, we were tired. We're trying to service all of these different complaints from customers, do all of these different things. And we were just like spinning our wheels. And so we analyzed the data, and what we found was actually that the customers that were actually causing most of the complaints had like the lowest balances in their account. And so what I realized, and when I say that, I'm talking about, these are high net worth individuals. So it's assets under management. So the AUM of those people were actually the lowest. But then the people with the highest AUM or, borderline private banking customers, they were quiet. And so either they were suffering in silence or they just weren't even making complaints. So what I realized is, what are we doing, falling and tripping over ourselves, servicing every little request and need that these low value customers are doing at the expense of neglecting our high value customers. So I think segmenting your customers and understanding who is actually driving the most value for the company and really focusing first on them as a priority and then working your way back. I mean, obviously you don't want to ignore your other customers, but at the same time, why should you put 3 people to resolve on a project, some customer complaint issue, for someone when you have a lot of other things that you could be doing for your higher value customers? I think for me, that's a gap or an issue that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, it talks back to your prioritization, right? As one of those pillars, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, I think about the future of a lot, and I think about the future of our discipline. And, decades ago when you and I got into this game, it wasn't what it is today, obviously.
Yeah.
How do you see experience management? Like, what are your thoughts on what this might look like 5 or even 10 years down the road if you want to go down that far?
Sure. Well, I think it's really encouraging to see the trend that we talked about when you talked about McDonald's and Walmart and these type of companies. I feel like the most sophisticated companies that are doing really well in the space have recognized this, the importance of customer experience. Call it what you want. I mean, maybe, every wants the new shiny thing, but really it's about aligning your products and services to the needs of the people that you're selling products and services to. So if you look at companies that are doing that and are doing that well, you have customer experience leader that's anchored right underneath the CEO. That's a CX, maybe that's a chief customer officer, chief experience officer. And then they're actually aligning all of their efforts around the needs of the customer. So that's why I love the name of the podcast, Be Customer Led, because that's at the end of the day, that really what it all boils down to. Do I think customer experience is going to go away or change in a material way? I don't think so. I mean, maybe some of the nomenclature and some of the practices may change a little bit, but I don't think you're really going to get away from having to be able to do journey mapping. Maybe it's analog or maybe it's digital, but I mean, starting very basically with understanding what is the journey that the customer has with us, what are the pain points, how are we going to actually add more value than we currently do. And I think hopefully my hope in being, I guess, maybe overly positive is just that there's this realization that the more that we focus on this, the more that we're going to unlock value for not only the company, but also users, partners, patients, customers.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you're 100% spot on. There's a lot in terms of those core fundamental capabilities of the work that we do every day. Those may evolve in some way, shape, or form, but those are just staples in the toolkit, right? And we're going to use those all the time to understand. I mean, look, given kind of my seat at Medallia, I can't get too far into it, right? But there's a lot of, I'm really excited for the technology that has become available to teams over, like, let's say the last 5 years. I mean, Medallia's a 20-year-old company, obviously. But for me, like, when you think about sort of the analytical capabilities, I mean, so much of this role has become very data heavy over the last couple of years for sure. When you look at things like journey analytics, journey orchestration, real time, just interaction management, and like being able to create the next best journey as a consumer, I'm going through it. That is pretty cool stuff. That is really cool stuff. I'm really excited for that.
I think, just dating you and I a little bit. I mean, when they didn't have any data, so I mean, data was like paper surveys or something like that. But I mean, now that obviously gets a lot more smart about how to abstract the right data and how to actually do things with it. I mean, because I think that's, for a while it was, okay, we have a lot of data. We understand we have a lot of data, but now how do we actually action it? How do we actually segment the right data? And actually, how do we actually overlay or map that to interactions in the experience where that actually gives us insights that we can actually action on? So I think that for me it's still TBD, to be determined or to be developed, I guess. But I totally agree with you, Bill. It opens up a whole world of really interesting possibilities, I think.
Yeah. And I think just, back to your point, as organizations are bringing together these disparate functions, well, not disparate, but like marketing, CX, et cetera, right? That's going to have, and then you kind of put in this sort of tech stack on top of that combination. I think it can be pretty powerful. I'm really hopeful. I'm pretty positive about sort of the future and direction of the discipline. But you're right. We got to understand what the ROI is. We got to make sure that we're prioritizing the right way. Those core tenets are really key. I've got two last questions for you. And I've actually been dying to ask you these two questions, by the way, all week. You have no idea.
Okay.
Who are the leaders you admire most in this space and why?
So this is where I say Bill Staikos?
No, you cannot. That's a good, definitely. By the way, that's not true, by the way, folks.
You can just Venmo me the money later. No, I think I owe something to Harley Manning, because Harley Manning, he's, in a lot of people's eyes, the godfather of a lot of customer experience or formalization of customer experience. He wrote, Inside Out and, or Outside In, Outside In. And, that kind of at least put a stake in the ground around customer experience. So I learned a lot from him. He was my boss while I was at Forrester for a long time. And so I learned some of the core, some fundamentals from him. But I think moving into the space, Matt Watkinson, who I think as well, who is an author, I actually remembered visiting him in a little shack in California once. And, he was just this brilliant guy, working along on his computer, working on his books. This is right before he wrote the Grid. And so, he just the ideas and the ability to articulate so clearly and so well about, some of the issues in customer spirit and space, for me, has always been really impressive. And so, I think he's something that I certainly look up to, and I certainly follow his, read his books and follow his work. And then I think, if I can be a little bit more noble, I think that also, all the people that are in marketing that have a sincere interest in understanding customer experience and have realized that, hey, the days of just marketing to customers has changed. And so we have to be a little bit more studied or at least up to date on what happens actually once we created the brand. Well, then the brand needs to come to life in the form of experiences. And so what does that look like? And so marketers that are making efforts to understand that side of it, I think I also have a lot of respect for.
Cool. Yeah. We were lucky enough to have Matt on this show not too long ago. The Grid was there's a couple of books that I really kind of keep on going back to. The Grid is one that really changed my perspective on the work that we do every day. And he's got a new one coming out this year. So I'm so excited to see that when it comes out. Ryan, where do you go for inspiration?
So I think, Bill, you're also a cyclist. So I think maybe you can agree that, it's great to just get out and go for a long ride and then just really clear your head. So I don't know if that's inspiration, but for me, it's just a really great time to just think. And actually sometimes when I'm, out in the middle of nowhere and I'm just slogging along and maybe I'm suffering, I'm moving to Colorado now. So there's a lot more hills. There's a lot more hills here than Tokyo. But sometimes when I'm really in pain cave, I guess I'll be, it gives me some fresh insight and some endorphins to think about new things. So I think that's really good. And, both of my girls are big climbers and stuff. And I used to be a professional climber. So I actually go, take them climbing and stuff like that a lot. So I think they really love that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, no, I get a lot of inspiration from being on a bike, just in the zone. And you do, when those endorphins go on, like the ideas just start coming fast and furious. All right, Ryan, you're running your own kind of shop. You're out with Chameleon Collective. Where can people find you if they want to reach out, learn more, and potentially work with you?
Yeah, so thank you, Bill. So they're doing a campaign on Valentine's Day. So February 14th, Chameleon's going to be doing social media posts across all the different channels for me. That's LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I think there's going to be also stuff on their website. Obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn, Ryan Hart, and based in Colorado now. So yeah, happy to have conversations with people. I'm an interim leader, so always happy to help to step in and help execute work. And that's how we're positioning ourselves as an extension or a team that executes the work, not just talks about frameworks all day.
It's awesome, Ryan. So good to see you again. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you, Bill. Thank you so much, Bill. It's great to see you again as well. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, man. Great to see you. All right, everybody. Another great show this week. We're out. Talk to you soon, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Be Customer Led with Bill Staikos. We are grateful to our audience for the gift of their time. Be sure to visit us at becustomerled.com for more episodes. Leave us feedback on how we're doing or tell us what you want to hear more about. Until next time, we're out.